So we'll have time for just a few questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Jason.
Thank you, everyone. Oh my goodness. Hi, everyone. My name's Jason. I'm a program manager under Saul. I'm extremely thankful and grateful to be here and for all the effort and energy that you're bringing. Something that has really been resonating with what people have mentioned is this concept of plurality, and mindfulness and coming to the breath has allowed for me to hold space for plurality and accepting multiple truths and multiple joys and multiple sufferings all at once. And you started to open up the storytellings of how you've kind of navigated these plural perspectives all colliding at once and bashing down on you. And I'm wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more about how mindfulness has, again, just a story perhaps of a time where you used mindfulness to really reconcile with these kind of jagged edges colliding and trying to navigate multiple truths and multiple sufferings all at once. Just wondering if you could kind of share maybe some stories about that. Thank you.
What comes to my mind is something maybe very simple. Being a climate scientist, I have been asked to serve in a think tank for the Saxon government. That's a province in Germany. And this think tank is supposed to answer questions of the government. Now, the government consists not necessarily of scientists. It consists of normal people, often lawyers, sometimes people from economy. So the biggest challenge was to find a language that does not use science terms and to not use scientific graphics, because you basically need a study to understand these funny graphics. So we translated that into images that everybody immediately understood, at least we thought so. And that helped a great deal. But there is another aspect of your question, and that is the evidence. And the evidence is something fluid. What we have as evidence today was not the evidence we had 20 years ago in climate science, for instance. And in another 20 years from now, we will have learned a lot more, and we may see things somewhat different. And yet, I have an easy time compared to medical people or psychologists because I deal with physics. And you don't really dispute or discuss with physical laws. That's the forte in climate science.
Yeah, so what your question made me think about was taking off my scientist hat and putting on my anthropologist hat and thinking about how we appreciate that there's different ways of knowing and experiencing the world. And so today, we've been talking about a lot of things, but in theory, the emphasis is on science, right? And thinking about how science can be used to study and in many ways validate a lot of these principles and practices of mindfulness. And that exercise is important and can be helpful because in our society, many people value science and we value empiricism. And so when you can bring data that says meditation lowers your blood pressure, we can measure that, and that is impactful for people to maybe pay attention who wouldn't have otherwise paid attention. But in doing that work, I think it's important to also be mindful that there are lots of things that we can't measure, but that doesn't mean that they're not true, right? So if we're talking about someone in meditation, like, yes, I can measure their heart rate in response to meditation, but how do I measure the joy that they say that they experience as a result of their practice? And that doesn't mean that that joy isn't real. It means that I, as a scientist, don't have a way to study that and measure that. And so I think it's important to do this work where we're trying to use science to measure these things, but also to make sure that we present that alongside other ways of knowing and make sure that we don't privilege the scientific way of knowing over people's lived experience. So I guess that's what I would add.
And I'd add just another dimension to what Jorgen Zane said, is that, you know, all scientists have lineages, both biologic ancestors and scientific lineages, and all scientists practice their research in a cultural context. And in terms of a plurality of scientific truths, it would be fascinating to do an experiment where you gave a data set to scientists in different cultures or from different backgrounds. And I suspect the conclusions might be vastly different. So just being aware that we all impose a whole nother lens on scientific, you know, truth by virtue of the legacies, both biologic and cultural, that we come from.
That was a beautiful question and beautiful responses from our whole panel. So we're going to close here in the interest of time. And I just want to thank all of our panelists for such a beautiful session. Well, it's really fun to see. Yes. All right. So please return to your seats.